This is the Westminster Standard Podcast. I'm Ryan Beasy, and today we have two returning guests, brave brothers that they are, the Reverend James Baird and Dr. Professor Michael Lynch. Welcome. Thanks for returning.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be back.
Well, since this is a return visit, why don't you just tell us briefly where you are? Mike, you're still in Delaware?
I am in Delaware. I teach at Delaware Valley Classical School full-time, and I also teach at the Davitt Institute part-time and do some other side jobs.
And James, you are in Florida, as I understand it.
Naples, Florida. Yep, I'm a pastor of Christian education at Covenant Church in Naples, and that's what I do. I'm the chaplain at our Christian school, which is
outstanding.
Cool.
Big fan of Christian education right here, and we hope to engage in some Christian education as we discuss your forthcoming book, which will be out, I believe, October 1st. So
Yes.
just a week or so after this airs or drops or goes live, and I do want to remind our listeners and viewers that the opinions and views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Jude 3 and the PCA. They are not necessarily those of me. And so if you should happen to disagree with anything that is said on this program, please feel free to take that up with James or Michael or your congressman. Marjorie Taylor Greene is my congressman. So if you don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, please don't write me about it. Take it up with her. I just say that because there was someone didn't like something that someone else said on this program and told me about it. And I'm sorry, we don't censor our guests. So, James, you've got this book on the relationship of the civil magistrate to the public good. And before we dive into that excellent little book that you were kind enough to send me a PDF to read, what would you say is the prevailing conception regarding religion and politics among contemporary American Protestants?
Well, I'd say since the mid-century, what most people think is that the government shouldn't have anything to do with religion at all. It should just totally stay out of religion. It always causes problems, and that there's this strict wall of separation from anything government-related and anything religion-related. So, eventually they start taking reading the Bible out of public schools, prayer out of public schools, and all of this is seen as good and constitutional. And that's what, not everyone will agree with that, but the majority of people do, and most people operate that way.
And so what you're saying is that's a relatively new position, not quite as old as dispensationalism, which is a new position, a new theology, a new teaching in the church anyway. But so the mid-century, mid-20th century, so post-war consensus, 1950s is, and that's, I think, when from our last conversation, I recall the last time the Supreme Court affirmed a blasphemy conviction was about 1946, 42, somewhere in there.
Somewhere around there. Yeah, it really starts in earnest with a Supreme Court case in, I believe, the 40s called Everson, where the court ruled against that particular case, but they inserted an opinion that the government doesn't have the right or competency to make any judgments regarding which religion is true, things like that. And then the Warren Court, which starts happening in the 1960s, is when you get some really bad cases. That's when they start ruling things like no prayer in school, things like that. Yep. So, and if you want to read a great article, Time and Klein recently wrote one in, was it the Harvard Law Review, on why Everson must fall and why it's an unconstitutional ruling that shouldn't be upheld.
Interesting. And just to be clear, when you say the Warren Court, not all the decisions of the Warren Court were bad, right?
No, not all of them were bad.
Okay. Just to be clear, because we don't want any mail about
right.
other decisions that may have been made by the Warren Court.
Are you trying to? Do you have in mind one maybe 64, 65?
I'm just want to make sure that James doesn't get in trouble, as if he were saying all the decisions of the Warren Court.
Yeah, right.
Were bad. Just the ones regarding
as an aside about the prayer in schools decision, at least. Yep. There was a Bill Buckley of National Review. This is post National Review. It started by then. On his firing line, he has a firing line dedicated to that topic, and he thought that it was wrong. right? So you have what we would call is like a, classic conservative,
Paleocon.
classic liberal, who as well thought that it got it wrong. And so my point would just be that even in the 60s, you have guys who we would term to be part of that post-war consensus, who are still saying that this is not unconstitutional. So it's just worth noting, like it's even later than that, where like every evangelical would be like, yeah, we shouldn't have prayer in schools, sort of thing. Like that's even more recent, because it wasn't being said in the 60s among many Christians, even very liberal ones. By liberal, I mean like just like freedom, sort of liberalism.
Not the ones with blue hair.
No, not those liberals.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does that phrase from Jefferson, wall of separation, to the Danbury Baptist, or separation of church and state, how does that shape the expectations of Christians in the West, particularly in this country?
Well, I think it's important to talk about what it originally meant. So originally it meant two things: separation of church and state. One was it didn't mean separation of Christianity and the state at all.
So you see a difference there between Christianity and the state.
Christianity and the church. Yep. So what it's basically saying is like, John Adams, one of the reasons he doesn't get elected is people are worried he's going to establish Calvinism as, the official religion of the U.S. And people are nervous about that. And which is really
all those dispensational. Oh wait, dispensationalism hadn't been invented by in the 18th century, had it?
That's right. So people don't want like a established church. They don't want people saying, there's Congregationalism is the Church of the United States, the National Congregationalist denomination. That's a little weird, but you get the idea. Or National Presbyterian Church. No, they wanted it to be Protestant. Actually, was a pan-Protestantism. They wanted all the different Protestant denominations to freely flourish under the United States government. Interestingly, so it meant separation of like church polity in a way, right? Or flavor of Protestantism from the state. It's also only talking about what the power of what's oftentimes called in the literature at the time, the general government, the federal government. It's limiting their power. So if you look at the First Amendment, for example, right, it says Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion, right? So it's limiting the powers of Congress. You did, in fact, still have states that officially declared that they were a Protestant state, right, at the time of the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And even states that didn't say this is a Protestant state, you still have religious tests for office that say, well, where it's not officially a Protestant state, but you have to be Protestant if you want to be in charge here, right? So there is a sense in which Protestantism, Christianity is established, but there is a distinction, a separation between the federal government, especially, and the whether or not you get kind of compelled or there are incentives to kind of prop up one denomination above the rest.
And that history that you outlined, it's probably more thoroughly reviewed in Miles Smith, Religion and the Republic, which came out, I guess, just last year. I think he was on the podcast to discuss that. And he, I believe, endorses your book.
He does, yeah.
So yours is a little bit thinner than this. But
I'm trying to save people time. So the point of my book is there's a whole lot of great literature out there on this topic of what's the duty of the government related to religion. And I wanted to give you a little easy to read book that's accurate and tightly argued, has all the sources that you would want, but you can read it in like one or two sittings and get the gist of the main ideas.
Yes, and then Miles gives the history of how this has been expressed. I think he even says that from the founding to the war between the states. So forward by Kevin DeYoung. So this is not something that is narrowly conceived.
No.
By one portion. This is just history. So Reformed Christians nowadays, though, generally expect what from the government regarding religious principles?
Well, I think right now there's a number of different camps, so it's hard to speak exactly for all Reformed folks. and we can talk about some of those camps
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah, but I think there's a conception though that the government needs to remain neutral.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But how you argue, I think in your book, well, I know you do, that an irreligious society would be dysfunctional. Why is it foolish to think the government can be neutral regarding religion?
Yep. I think that it's a fact of history that if you look, like, governments just can't be neutral, right? There's always some sort of religious or pseudo-religious principle that drives it, right? And it's in the nature of humanity that we're more than just material, right? We have a higher purpose, a higher calling, and government can't, Charles Hodge has this great quote where he talks about how the government can ignore religion as easily as it can ignore biology. Right. Humans.
And what do we see today, or what did we see in the previous administration?
Yeah. Maybe if you lose one, you lose the other, which seems pretty clear. So yeah, it's impossible for the government to be neutral, right, on religion entirely. You may be neutral on Presbyterianism versus Congregationalism, right? But you can't be neutral on Hinduism versus Islam versus Christianity versus Eastern Orthodoxy versus, right?
As we're seeing in Dearborn, Michigan, just this month.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the first one is, I think neutrality is impossible, but the other one is neutrality is wrong. That's the main argument of my book. When you look at reason and scripture, our confession, our tradition, American history, there's every reason in the world for the government not to be neutral on the question of religion, which is a basic biblical principle, right? You're for God or you're against him. Right? You can't be. There's no neutrality.
Yeah. I see what you mean, but especially more recently, there's something Reform Two Kingdoms (R2K), especially coming from a western part of the country, and making a biblical argument that we should not impose religious views upon the government, and that's a very poor summary. I wonder, Dr. Lynch, can you summarize for us the R2K view, steelman that argument?
The R2K guys want to say that the institutional church and everything related to the institutional church is part of Christ's spiritual kingdom. And they want to say that basically everything else in the world is part of this secular world, this other kingdom, this kingdom that's passing away. And they say they want to emphasize the fact that the gospel and scripture is for that spiritual kingdom, not for the temporal kingdom. Which includes literally everything but the institutional church. And they argue that the principles of, say, government are really bound up with the Noahic covenant. They tie it to the Noahic covenant in that it is there when God instituted civil government, and the main role, it seems to me, from what I know, because I actually haven't read David Van Druden's book where he exposits. I've only read a lot of secondary stuff of people talking about his views. So if I get it wrong, my apologies to begin with. But as far as I can understand, the main role of the government and God's institution of the government at the Noahic covenant is to deal with retributive justice. And so you do get a sense, if that's true, so this is on supposition that I understand it correctly, and if not, then this wouldn't be true. It seems to follow that the main role of the government is to deal with harm. Harm, property harm, bodily harm.
Breaks your leg or picks your pocket.
What's up?
Someone who breaks your leg or picks your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That assumes certain things. It assumes, for example, that government is a post-fall institution, which is very contested in the Reform period. I would say the majority, if not the great majority of Reformed theologians in the 16th, 17th century saw government as as something that would have happened prelapsarian. In other words, that you would have had so therefore harm principle obviously is not the main role of the government if you think that it would have existed under the pre-fall society, right? It would be for good order purposes. It would be for the fact that we're not all created equal and some people need to lead and other people need to submit, even in a prelapsarian society where Adam and Eve have children, there's no sin and these sorts of things. Anyhow, but I'm not here to criticize as much as just to explain. For them, the institutional church is a spiritual church. God rules that spiritual kingdom through Christ, the mediator, and the temporal kingdom is ruled by God as just creator. And it's via natural law, particularly with government's role being built on this harm principle that God instituted to help society after the flood.
And so that would be distinct from the classic church's spiritual mission view, going beyond that there should be no influence. And I think does it not, based on what you've said, presume that we'll have sort of a libertarian government. That
it doesn't. I suppose not necessarily libertarian, but it does again see the main function of government as simply keeping people from being as bad as they would be naturally, right? As harming one another. It doesn't have. So we would say that that's one role for parents. But it's not the only role that parents play with regards to their children. And if we just move that one step further, I would just say the government is, in that sense, just a bigger form of, parents might corporally discipline. There's certainly retributive justice that happens at the family level, but that's not the only thing we do. Similarly, and we're not the church. I'm going to agree that my family is not the church. It's not the institutional church, right? But in the same way, I would just widen the view out, and the government is kind of just a bigger master servant structure. I just mean that there are people that are that have dominion, and those people that are underneath that dominion, right?
Inferiors.
Yeah, inferiors and superiors. That's the word. That's what I was looking for. Yes, you're right. It's just a higher inferior superior structure.
Yeah.
And I would say that the same sorts of ends that that parents would have relative to their children, so the government should basically have with regard to society at large, noting that at a smaller level, some things are done easier at a more federal, local level, and then some at a more higher national level, right? Obviously, just using wisdom.
It's worth pointing out, too, that the analogy that you're drawing, where you're comparing parenthood over their children to the government over their subjects, is confessional, right? This is the reason why the Westminster Larger Catechism includes the civil magistrates as those styled as fathers and mothers in the Fifth Commandment. So
correct.
This is very Reformed. It's confessional. It's Presbyterian to say that the duties of the government are alike to the duties of parents with regard to their children.
So in your book, James, you argue government must promote Christianity as the only true religion. That's your thesis. And I have a question about that.
Okay.
Why did you use must instead of has a duty to?
Has a duty to, because must is one word and has a duty to is four. So
you weren't being paid by the word?
Yes. Was not paid by the word.
Yes, we have no bananas.
Yes, that's right. That's the thesis of the book. Government must promote true religion. How does that relate to R2K, Radical Two Kingdoms, Reformed Two Kingdoms? Here's the best argument my favorite argument against R2K. And it uses the form of modus tollens for you logic nerds. So modus tollens is if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. So in this case, it would go something like, if R2K is true, then the government must not promote true religion, right? But if we prove the government must promote true religion, then that means R2K is false. So basically, if my book is successful and it's true that the government must promote true religion, that means R2K is not correct and either needs to be abandoned or severely modified. And hopefully through our conversation, through your book, you'll see biblical, logical, historical, confessional, traditional reasons to affirm something that Christians throughout the West, 2,000 years, just about, and throughout the Reformed tradition until very recently, affirmed this very fundamental thing. Calvin himself says that the most fundamental principle for any constitution of a government, most important concern is the piety of the people, and all nations have always affirmed this. So that's how instead of digging in to critique R2K, I think all you need to do is prove the concept.
Yeah, and it's stronger than just 2,000 years of Christianity.
That's true.
It's consider the nations.
That's right.
Right?
Natural law.
All societies have, throughout the history, we can find Cicero, we can find Plato, we can find Aristotle, we can find Asians saying such things like ancient Asian historians and philosophers. Like, this has been universally understood that the civil magistrate has a duty to promote true religion. The only question has ever really been which one.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So, in Asia, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever, obviously in Islam countries, it's Islam and so on and so forth. But they all have believed that the civil magistrate has the duty to promote it. It's just the question of which one. It's always been that question.
And for that reason, I would say if we can't learn from natural law that the government must promote true religion, then we can't learn anything from natural law. If we can't learn that one, then we can't learn anything, because it's as firmly in the law of nations as any other principle. And
R2K would rely on natural law as to what the magistrate is to do, I presume.
Yeah, so the magistrate's supposed to rule according to natural law. That's what R2K says. Natural law says the magistrate must promote true religion. Therefore, R2K can't be correct. If R2K,
in that area, I'm sure there are other.
Yeah. There's going to be many things that get right, but on this question, the one we're talking about today,
right?
If R2K is correct, R2K is wrong.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for those of you getting ready to send letters, we're not saying R2K, they're not Christians, right?
No.
Dr. Lynch, when you said guys, you could have said brothers, right? You could consider these people brothers, right? Absolutely. Nobody needs to mail us a letter accusing us of anything.
Absolutely.
Let me be clear. I do consider them to be brothers. Like, just absolutely so.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
they may not, some of them may not all think I am, but I certainly do believe that they are.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to clarify, because sometimes people hear what we're not saying and they get upset and they hit the comment section.
They can always send me emails. I get parents from my school. Well, what are a few more emails from, disgruntled Ryan Beasy podcast.
Yeah, this is not a question about the competency or the character or the faith of anyone we disagree with. It's just a simple question, which is, what's true? Yeah. Must government promote true religion or not?
And that's the thesis of your book. And this is an academic debate, an intramural debate among Reformed dealing with historical theology. So now that we've gotten through that, so you define Christianity as the church of our common Lord without giving preference to any denomination of Christians above the rest. So you're not arguing for establishmentarianism. You're not arguing for theonomy in your book. You're arguing for an historic view of the church regarding the state's role in promoting Christianity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is not an argument for establishmentarianism in the classic sense of like establishing a church. America is Presbyterian, or America is an American flavor of Protestantism or something. It's talking about the truth of Christianity, that the government has a duty to promote, encourage, advance, all the various verbs you could pick to do what the Westminster Confession says in chapter 23, section 2, maintain piety. They want to, and of course, when it says maintain there, it doesn't mean be an unfaithful servant who hides the talent, right? You actually want to advance something here, right? You want to return a profit after serving in office.
As a minister of
Yes,
God.
as a minister of God. That's exactly right. As a magistrate. So yes, it's not preferencing one denomination or something like that. It's the Christian faith.
All right, so there I get confused. Yeah, I'm a simple person. I don't have a doctorate or anything like some people on this podcast. But so if the government is not to give preference to any one denomination of Christians over the other, well, doesn't that then place the government into in the role of determining what is Christianity? You know, are the Mormons Christian? Are Jehovah's Witness so-called Christian? Are Methodists Christian? You know, how does that? How would that work out practically?
Yeah, yeah. So yes, the magistrate has a duty to determine which faith is true, just like every single other human being, right? A moral responsibility. Now, the magistrate is not supposed to lock himself in a closet or go to a monastery, right? And try and divine these things purely by himself. He has to consult God's word. He has to consult ministers. He has to look at the traditions and history of the nation itself. There's lots of things that go into that process. But fundamentally, when people say, does that mean he has to know which religion is true? The answer is yes.
So, and
just like a father, right, who must encourage religion with his kids, needs to figure out which one is true.
And would you say that he has a duty then to prevent false religions? There was something that I think Protestia was on their Twitter page. Some evangelical Lutheran Church of America priestess with a really bad haircut, looked like a fight with a lawnmower or something. But you know, where she was explaining, you know, the offensiveness of the text that they are reading in church that week, and she said that the sermon would then be deconstructing that. So let's say your thesis is accepted. We go back to the the consensus of the 19th century American. Would it be the role of the magistrate to go into that congregation and do two things? You know, depose that minister and give she a proper haircut?
Sorry, the haircut threw me off. Yeah, see, this is one reason why what makes me an American Presbyterian, right?
Okay.
My answer to that is no, right?
Okay.
That's not what we're supposed to do. If you had a national church, right, established church, that's exactly or he would use his various means, right, to do that. The Americans very early on, what they start focusing in on primarily, it's kind of unique about the way that Protestantism gets expressed in America, is the positive duty of the magistrate, right? The positive duty to encourage true religion. Now, if you look at someone like John Witherspoon, right? John Witherspoon would say that the magistrate must also discountenance the impious, right? So they see your displeasure, you know, they may not get that promotion, they may not get that word of praise, they may not appear behind him when he's at the podium. He'll do things like this to discountenance impiety, irreligion, right? But in America, generally, especially the higher up you are in government, we want you to have a very light touch. A very light touch. You know, the president is the 800-pound gorilla in the rowing boat, right? So he needs to be very careful about these things and be very prudent in how he does these things.
And that's how it had been expressed in the 18th and late 18th and 19th century. And even, I wonder, 1689, the Act of Toleration, the Bill of Rights that the English king signed when William of Orange, the Dutch prince who became the English king, which was relevant to Francis McCamey or McCamey, depending on who tells you how to pronounce it, when he was arrested by the governor of New York for preaching without a license, and he appeals to the 1689. So does that factor into American thinking back in 1788 and 89 when they're revising the Confession of Faith?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to hear Lynch's thoughts on that, though.
I was hoping.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I read through McKimmy's account of that all. But I would note to you that the very fact I always note to people don't really understand that there's like 3 degrees going on. There's things that you can support.
Mm-hmm.
So, established church would be the strongest thing, right? Where like taxpayer money is going to particular, congregations and these sorts of things.
And that's not what you're arguing for, right?
No, that's not what I'm arguing for.
Yeah, and then there's what he's basically arguing for is a soft established Christian church, just writ broadly pan confessional, just as long as you basically hold the Apostles' Creed, you're good, sort of thing, and maybe only Protestant.
Yeah.
But then there's toleration,
Mm-hmm.
and toleration was. It's acceptable if you get a license, if you sign a creed saying that you hold to at least these propositions. I believe at the time it was still Trinitarian. So for McKimmey, what? Yeah, exactly. However you, he had to. So obviously he was not in the Church of England, but he was tolerated, and what that meant was you don't get all the benefits of being part of the country, religiously speaking. So you have to, when you worship, you have to have the doors open, right? That's one of the things. You just read the Act of Toleration. It's not that long. I mean, that's one of them in it. You have to have your doors open. You have to sign a confession, and the confession is not the 39 articles, but it's like a. It would be basically like Apostles'
Protestant.
Creed sort of thing. Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know if the Act of Toleration allowed for Catholics at the time. I can't remember. But it definitely, atheists, no. Non-Trinitarians, no. They are not tolerated, which means that it is illegal for them to worship in England. So there's this middle thing called toleration, okay, that is a separate category from what we ever talk about. So I might even be happy with a promotion of pan-Christianity and tolerating Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
After all, Mormons and Jews and certain other things that it's just, they are part of our culture so much that it would be unwise to make it just illegal.
Exactly.
Right? And toleration is that happy medium. You have to sign off. You would sign off for if you just sign off that you're a theist, basically, right? And that you hold to, we might say, love God, love your neighbor, as the fulfillment of the 2 great commands that the divine has given to all of us. And yeah, and that might be it. And you tolerate them. The great thing about toleration is that it says we don't support you, we're tolerating it. We are simply, it's basically saying we're not prosecuting it. This is exactly what is happening in states where they've taken off the books marijuana laws. It's basically toleration. It's basically, it's not saying we support it. It's saying we're non-criminalizing it. Right? There's 2 different things that the state could say. The state could come out and legalize it, or rather they could just take the laws off the books. And that's more of a toleration posture. And that itself has a way of saying something. You are promoting the true religion by calling it a toleration of, say, Mormonism, of, say, some of these other things. Anyways, all the point, I'm not actually trying to say that we should have anything.
That's just a historical background and
do
illustration.
that. Yeah, I'm just saying that there's other language that we should be attuned to, right? There's illegal, there's toleration, and then there's support. And those are actually the 3 categories, right? So he's saying it should support true religion.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
And I would say there may be good reason to tolerate other things that aren't true religion. And then there would be things where you would say it's illegal. And by the way, the state already does that. There are certain religious practices that you cannot practice here. Like, as far as I know, animal sacrifice is illegal, right? As far as I understand it.
I haven't looked that up recently.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident. So even if you're, you could like not sacrifice cats to the god of, I don't know, they thems.
Animal
but,
sacrifices
as far
are
as I know, that is illegal, and you could not get the approval from the the civil magistrate has laws against polygamy. Polygamy might be seen to be a religious practice. Indeed, Mormonism has taught it, at least in the past. It's my understanding that they've changed on that, right? But states still said it was illegal, right? They just said you cannot practice that. So it already says in a very general, where everyone really agrees that there are certain things. It doesn't matter if it's a religious principle, you cannot practice it, right? Child sacrifice, we don't care if you're an Aztec, a neo-Aztec, right? You're not going to be able to do that. Sorry, right? You
the new Batman movie notwithstanding, of course.
What's that?
I think there's a new Batman movie where he is an Aztec, so that even so that's more relevant than you may have intended
indeed.
There.
So all that, yes, indeed. So all that to say is what I'm already saying is that the state does limit religious practice already, the legality of certain religious practices. It's just that it's so limited that no one really ever has a problem with them, right? It's really.
And if I could interrupt you there.
Yes.
When there was this Protestant consensus at the end of the 18th and into the 19th century, people may not have even noticed that there were restrictions until all those Irish came in and the Italian, we had this influx of papists, and then people even beyond the pale of Christianity. So there's more of an analogy than people realize, Dr. Lynch, would you say?
Yes. And to the McKimmy thing, or McKimmy, I think McKimmy is the way I've always said it, until I think I heard you say it differently, and then all of a sudden I'm getting all
maybe I only read it then
flustered. Yeah, I've heard people say it too, and I've heard it different ways. Anyways, it is important to note that when he goes before the judicial, it goes into the judicial system in New York. I believe it's New York, in front of the governor. In his case, he does not say you do not have the right to do this stuff. In other words, you don't have the right to tell me this. Instead, he says, I've been licensed by the king according to the Act of Toleration. Right? And so you need to take this up with the king, basically, because I've been licensed. And he says, well, I don't care what he's done. If he gave you a license here, it doesn't mean the license works there, even though it did. And that's why he kind of wins, but kind of loses too. It's actually the way that it turns out is kind of bad for McKimmy. He's like thrown in jail for 30 days or something like that. It has to pay all the fines for the court fees and stuff or something like that. But at the end of the day, my point is that McKimmy does not go in there claiming modern liberalism, i.e., you do not have the right to talk about religion and determine what I'm doing. Rather, it's that he's basically saying, I didn't break a law. That's his whole argument. I didn't break any law. You're wrong.
Going back to the three category, we're 38 minutes in. I should have started with this because it's the number one objection brought up to my book. And it's because I think people don't have quite as clearly in their minds the three categories that Michael pointed out, right? Where you have support, toleration, illegal, right? When I say the government must support true religion, that does not entail non-toleration. No, it doesn't, right? You can have many different opinions on who should be tolerated, how, when, where, who shouldn't, all across the spectrum. You can have all sorts of views about what religious practices should and shouldn't be tolerated. But everyone could still at the same time agree that the true religion should be supported. And I wrote the book the way that I did, kind of a conciliatory document to say, hey, this is something that the vast majority, all the Reformed tradition agreed on until recently. And I think people from many different camps can agree on it. Even if you have
And it's
different
published by Baptists, if I'm not mistaken.
published by a Baptist. That's right. I went back to my roots.
So you say, however they promote Christianity, they must ensure they promote it with love, strength, and especially prudence, which gets to your point that you've made elsewhere. I think you make it in the book as well, that the magistrate needs to understand the limits of not just his constitutional power, but the actual power that he has. That, like in Atlanta, where the speed limit's 55, but everybody's going 75. If you get a cop out there who's starting to enforce the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, there's going to be huge troubles.
That's right.
It's imprudent, yes.
That's right. Yeah, the magistrate has to be very careful and shrewd, and as well as strong and loving, as I say in the book, about how he promotes true religion, right? Because there's some ways he could do it that are in principle permissible, but the way he did it, how he did it, like makes everything worse, right? You could, so if the president of the United States got up and said, listen, everyone doesn't believe in Jesus is going to hell, right? It's like, true, right? We could have said that differently, more winsomely, right? Could have picked the right time, right? True, gospel truth, right? But, maybe he doesn't do it flippantly like that, right? He does it earnestly, as a desire for their salvation from their sins, where they can find hope. You see, so there's prudent and imprudent ways to promote true religion, and the magistrate ought to do it prudently.
And so in this promotion of the true religion that you believe is the duty of the magistrate, that's what you're arguing in your book, what is the difference between civil religion and the role of government? Because I think a lot of people in my generation and what I, until recently were saying, well, all of that stuff, that was just civil religion and civil religion is bad, not realizing maybe A, it wasn't all civil religion, and B, maybe there is actual good that comes from civil religion. I'm still working some of that out. But so what is the difference between civil religion?
I'll go on the record as saying civil religion is better than civil irreligion, right?
That's that's the argument of the book.
Not saying now, civil religion can mean many things, right? It can mean sort of all the pomp and circumstance of religious ceremonies with none of the substance.
With the Hindu Prime Minister of England reading a scripture at the coronation of Chucky III.
Yes, people really do think about like the King of England, where he gets up and he says, I have a duty to defend the Reformed religion. That's in his actual vow or whatever they call it.
As the King of Scotland,
his
right?
Oath, right? His oath. And yet people see what that looks like and they're like, that doesn't look anything like it.
That's right.
In other words, civil religion really is a fancy way of religious hypocrisy. It stands in for religious hypocrisy.
That's right.
And of course, none of us want religious hypocrisy.
But, and this is where I'm going to be controversial, I might get an email. Religious hypocrisy is terrible, right? But what is worse is openly opposing true religion in every way and shirking it, right? Because at least with hypocrisy, there's, they do it some of the time. That's why it's a hypocrite, right?
They're ashamed, right? They're hypocrites because what they may be doing in secret is shameful, but publicly.
That's right.
Yes, in the same way that we say it's more grievous, or that hating one's brother in one's heart is bad, it's sin, but actually murdering them is worse.
That's
right. So I'd rather have the hypocrite who hates everyone, walks around, hates everyone, but doesn't kill anyone, as opposed to the one that hates everyone and kills everyone.
That's right.
Right. Like this is just obvious.
Right. But nuance is required to understand. And that's why you might get an email about that, because someone is thinking you're saying, oh, hypocritical religion is good. No, you said it was bad. Just to be clear.
Yeah, it's bad. My book is not supporting hypocritical religion or fake religion, anything like that.
You're promoting the true religion, and that's what the magistrate has a duty to promote, the true religion.
That's right.
And you make these four. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say.
So you make these four important qualifications. The mission of the church is spiritual.
Yes.
And so you are not arguing the church should tell the state what to do. The church should tell people how to, or that the church should tell people how to vote, but that the state should promote Christianity. And so can you remind people of how those two things have been held. I don't know if intention is the right word, but in the 19th century, ministers were often very active in the polis as well as in the church, and that wasn't, even Thornwell, even Robinson up in was it Louisville?
Stewart.
Yeah, Stuart Robinson. Yes, thank you. Stuart Robinson was on the town council and did not see this as a conflict of the spirituality of the church.
That's
so
right.
Can you articulate that better than I can, stammering and stuttering over here?
We'll see. I'm not sure I can. If not, so yeah, one thing to point out that you're picking up on is the difference in office, right? There's a difference between the powers that a pastor has in his office as a spiritual minister, right? And that same person may also have the office of a civil minister, right? And that there's spiritual power there, and then there's physical power with the civil office. So there's two different kingdoms in that sense, right? Different kingdoms, and so the spiritual kingdom, right? You have the spirituality of the church. It's what are its weapons, right? What are its tools, right? The keys to the kingdom, right? The ordinary means of grace, right? That's what the church is about. Preaching it's declarative. That's what our BCO says, right? It's
ministerial and declarative.
Ministerial and declarative. That's exactly right. So,
and one poor guy on the floor of presbytery, he said magisterial and declarative, and you could see some hackles go up. But we knew what he meant, and it was okay.
Yeah, ministerial and declarative, right? So that is so. For example, your church officers shouldn't be getting into the weeds of public policy, right? The reason why that is the case is actually a little technical, but super valuable when you understand it. So what is the job of a civil magistrate? This job of a civil magistrate, one of them, the main one, is he should look at the law of God, the way God made the universe to work, right? And the principles of natural law, and then apply them to a particular situation in a way that helps the people do what's right and not what's wrong. That is fundamentally the job of a magistrate, which means that to go from this is how God made the world, this is his natural laws, to here's what we should do in this particular circumstance requires something classically called prudential determination. They have to have a particular kind of wisdom about what the law of God means for this particular scenario. What the minister does is not come in and make prudential determinations. One of the 10 Commandments is don't murder people, so the speed limit should be 35 miles per hour. Well, minister can't do that. That's the civil minister's job to decide on 35 miles per hour, not the spiritual minister. What the spiritual minister does with the ordinary means of grace, and part of proclaiming the gospel, is to teach how everyone ought to live holy lives throughout the week, which means he teaches God's 10 Commandments, which is a restatement of his natural law. So he will tell the minister in his seat on Sunday morning when he's going to church, because he should be at church, the civil minister, right, the magistrate, will tell him, it's your duty to do everything you can to keep people from murdering each other, right? And in that sense, that is a public teaching, proclamation, declaration of what that civil ruler ought to do the next day. But the minister can't, the pastor can't look and say, therefore it should be 35 miles per hour. That's up to the civil officer to do that.
Yeah.
It's similar to that exchange between, was it Gillespie and James VI, where Gillespie says, there are two kings and two kingdoms in Scotland. And James, you are king of the civil realm, but in Christ's kingdom, you're not an officer, you're not a king, you're just a member.
That's right. One follow-up. This is why you'll notice in my book, I did not say government must promote true religion, therefore I want President Trump to do X, Y, and Z. Nope.
But it would be nice if he fired Paula White, wouldn't it?
I can definitely say that one. But anyway, you get the idea. I'm not saying, I'm not telling him what to do, because that is up to his prudential determination. The job of the pastor, the general duties of God's law for all stations in society, right?
Hmm.
Fathers, mothers, husband, wife, children, employee, employer. You teach God's duties for all of them, right? And it is especially important for the people in official offices who are part of that civil kingdom not to go beyond what you've been commissioned to do. You shouldn't be doing his job, do your job. So my book is very clear. I'm going to say the government has to promote true religion. I'll give you a few examples of like what that could look like, but I'm not pushing any policies or particular proposals. That's up to our actual civil rulers. So recently in my county, for the past 8 months or so, every once in a while, the county commissioners would invite me to do the invocation before they would meet. And they got a whole lot of the gospel and they got a whole lot of their duties as civil magistrates in those prayers. And at the meeting before last, they voted to display the 10 Commandments in all county buildings, right? And that was, I can preach in their duties to promote piety, justice, and peace. And then it was their decision to say, well, one small way we're going to do that is to honor the 10 Commandments in these buildings. And that's a very good thing. All that makes sense?
Yeah, yes. And so you argue, as you pray, I assume that the authorities must maintain piety, justice, and peace according to the wholesome laws of each commonwealth. And you argue that's not just Christian magistrates. That's
Correct.
all magistrates have this duty. That's what we confess. Do I understand correctly? Because I think many may understand that as, well, a Christian who assumes the office of magistrate, which is how the paragraph begins, may promote or ought to promote piety, justice, and peace. But you're saying all magistrates, whether it's Donald Trump or Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right. So let's read the whole paragraph. It is lawful for Christians to accept and execute the office of a magistrate when called thereunto. So we're saying we're not Anabaptist. Right? Does Anabaptists say Christians can't be in civil government? We don't believe that. Okay. The Christians can serve in government. Then it says, in the managing whereof, as they ought especially to maintain piety, justice, and peace, according to the wholesome laws of each commonwealth. So for that end, they may lawfully, now under the New Testament, wage war upon just and necessary occasions. So suppose we say that this part of the confession is not saying that all magistrates must promote piety, only Christian magistrates. Then I would just say, was it also saying that only Christian magistrates can wage war upon just and necessary occasion? Or what is it? Is it what it's saying is these are the duties of a magistrate and Christians may fulfill that role? That's what it's saying, right? Here's the duty of a magistrate. Christians may serve in this office.
And it seems like the especially that the magistrate is especially to do those three things. There may be other things, but he's especially to do those three things. And you say
the other thing is, like, you can also just read the Westminster Divines, and it's super clear they believe this is what all magistrates must do.
Well, but this is the American version. So even the American versions in 1788 or 87 understood this to be
American Presbyterians too, right? I mean, I've read so many American Presbyterian sermons, and it could not be clearer that they believed it's critical for the magistrate to promote and maintain piety. John Witherspoon, George Duffield, Samuel Stanhope Smith, like these are the guys on the revisions committee, right, for the 1788 revisions. Ashbel Green is a young guy at the time, not really influential, but he's kind of the successor to Witherspoon and Stanhope. Same thing. Government must promote piety, must maintain the piety of the people. So, yeah, this is a consistent fixture of Presbyterianism.
And this is public piety, right? So this is, as we talked before, that they're not exercise. There's no forced conversions. They're not going into the session room and making sure that people are. This is public.
Yeah, so that's a very important distinction, right? So the civil magistrate only has authority over external matters, right? He has no authority about what's going on in your heart. That's absurd, right? No human can change another human's heart. They can't reach into the heart, right, and search out what you really truly believe. That's the Spirit of God that does that, it's not you. So the magistrate can't enforce belief, right? But the magistrate can encourage, which is what my book argues, certain outward action, right? It can encourage different things that is conducive to true heart change. So, for example, when J.D. Vance does a speech, right? A lot of Americans are going to watch. Why? He's the vice president, right? And as they're watching, what does he do? He recites the Nicene Creed. Is the Apostles' Creed or Nicene? Nicene Creed.
Nicene.
Recites the Nicene Creed, and you're watching him because he has status power to gain your attention. Can he make you believe it? Nope. Are tons of people in America right now saying that sounded pretty good? They're considering it. Yeah. And the Spirit of God now has a special opportunity to move. So that's what we're talking about.
And so as you develop your argument, you say government has a duty to promote public good. That's what is basic, right? Government has a duty to promote public good. And then the secondary, is Christianity is part of the public good. Since it's the only true religion, therefore, government has a duty to promote the true religion. That you can't have the public good without true religion.
That's right. So with the syllogism, if you're looking over it and you're trying to figure out what you believe, it's a very simple argument. You said it, I'll say it again, but government must promote the public good. True religion is a part of the public good. Therefore, the government must promote true religion. If you disagree with the conclusion, then you need to figure out which premise is false. And if you can't unprove one of the two premises, then you have to believe the conclusion. So you have to say, do I believe it's the job of government to promote the public good? And do I believe that Christianity is part of the public good?
And I think that minor premise there is where most of the pushback is coming from. Yep. But you assert everything wonderful in our society sits upon the foundation of Christianity.
Let's define public good too. Public good means something. Basically, it means something good for everybody. Right? Private good would mean like I personally got richer. Well, that may not be all that great for you two. It's great for me, maybe not for you two, right? But let's say our nation is well defended against its enemies. That's a public good. It's good for everyone here. So the question is Christianity good for everyone? Yes. Could the Bible be any clearer, right? If everyone became a Christian, it would be good for everyone, right? So Scripture, that's what could
be more gooder?
Yeah, what could be more gooder, right? Then we can go ahead.
To interrupt you, why didn't Paul, when he's got Erastus, the city treasurer, when he's got some of the Asiarchs who are his friends, why is there no record of him saying to the Asiarchs, to Erastus, you need to promote Christianity, you need to tear down the temple?
Hold on. He is already assuming that they believe that.
Yeah.
And he's trying to convert them. Which is definitely, we do have a record of. We're told explicitly that that's what he's doing. Right? He's trying to convert them. This is exactly what he does with Festus and these sorts of things. I believe, if I got it right, like I'm thinking Acts 20.
Yeah, Felix and Festus, 24. I get the two guys.
Right. Either way. And then when he goes before Caesar, all signs say that he's excited because he gets to do this in front of Caesar as well, right? So he doesn't need to. I already said, at least my belief is that the Caesars would have already, and the magistrates would have already believed that they had a duty to promote true religion. The issue is that they're promoting pagan religions, right? Like Greco-Roman religion.
Right? Great as Artemis of the Ephesians.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, exactly. And what he's doing is he's trying to convert them. And what does he expect? If you convert them, what are they going to do? Promote the right religion at that point. And so that's what's going on.
To my question, especially the Asiarchs, perhaps you could say that, well, they told him not to go into the theater. They told him to stay hidden because they were his friends. And would that be, as they were able to, according to the wholesome laws of that commonwealth and according to the prudence, love, and strength that they have, that's what they can do at that time. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, ask the question again.
The Asiarchs, who were Paul's friends, they told him, don't go. Don't go defend. Is that all that they could do at that point, given that you said that the magistrate needs to promote the true religion with prudence? That if the Asiarchs all of a sudden are tearing down the temple to Artemis Diana,
Oh, right.
That's an imprudent use of power, or based on
I don't remember the story. I know that's yeah. I have to look.
Yeah, I remember. I teach it every year in Acts. Is this like Acts
19, I
18,
think.
19,
Yeah.
something like that? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I just don't remember the details enough about that. And I
Yeah.
have to think about that through the lens of political theology because I don't think I've ever thought about it. I have thought about it about when he goes before like Festus and these sorts of things, and then the Caesar thing.
Yep.
But I haven't thought about it in that question, but I have to think about that. But there is always a prudent question.
Yeah.
In other words, sometimes he stays in cities, sometimes he leaves cities, depending on, persecution and stuff like that. There's always prudence questions that are involved here, right? Rome isn't built in a day, nations aren't Christianized in a day, and therefore you may live to fight another day, right? And these sorts of things. And also, just in general, tearing down.
That was a capital offense to tear down a temple.
Yeah, tearing down temples. I mean, that would just be very highly imprudent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking, like if you start doing that, and it was for those that were doing it, right? We know this to be fact, anyways. You might say, well, yes, this is one way to attack pagan religion, but the better way might be to convert the magistrate, and then he can just start tearing down temples.
Yeah.
After all, actually, an attack on the temple is also an attack on the magistrate. So there's issues because those are often financed by magistrates, and so
well, I can. So the larger catechism talks about this, right? So let me figure out. I'm trying to remember which question it is.
Oh, and while you're looking in Acts 16 in Philippi, after Paul is arrested, he refuses to leave, and he demands the magistrates come to him. And after that, the church in Philippi thrives. And so there's a way that the apostle is making sure that the magistrates leave Christianity unmolested, even if they aren't converted yet.
Yep.
So larger catechism 108, right on the second commandment. So this is what it says. It's the sins. Is this the duties?
This is the duties. Yeah.
Right. So the disapproving, detesting, opposing all false worship, and then listen to this. And according to each one's place and calling, removing it and all monuments of idolatry. This is in the American version, by the way, of the Westminster Larger Catechism. So according to the Divines and the American Presbyterians, when they're saying they're according to each one's place and calling, they're basically saying if you're a private citizen, you shouldn't be going around tearing down mosques or something. That's totally inappropriate. That's not your place. You don't have authority in the civil realm. But the magistrate does have authority over these things. And according to the Westminster Larger Catechism, it says that magistrates should work to get rid of monuments of idolatry. So, for example, we see these monuments going up in Texas and other places, these Hindu statues. Our Presbyterian pastors should be addressing their magistrates and teaching them that they should be removing monuments of idolatry. That is what a confessional Presbyterian PCA pastor should be doing to keep his ordination vows, really.
And if you're a Presbyterian pig farmer and your pig truck just happens to overturn where they're building the new mosque, and some pigs happen to die and get buried there, that,
I wouldn't recommend it. Although it's, yeah. Anyway, so that's the idea. That's how I would apply that particular case in Acts. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. So, where would we? Are you advocating then for the sanctions of the Old Covenant law to be imposed?
No. What we are advocating is that the moral law be the ground and fount of all of our civil laws. And that's very different, right? When we look in the Old Testament, what we see is God applying his moral law to the particular circumstance of the Israelites. Are we in the particular circumstance of the Israelites today? No, we're not, right? Those civil laws don't apply to us anymore. Can we learn wisdom by seeing how God applied the Ten Commandments
Yeah.
in their particular scenario? Absolutely. There's this great quote from Archibald Alexander, where he says, the history of these nations of Judah and Israel would be worth studying if for no other reason, for the lessons of political wisdom which might be learned. For God deals with nations now as then.
What? Hold on. Was he reading Bonson? Oh, wait a second. That doesn't work, does it?
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
So
there's the general equity principle.
Yeah, of course. Right. Can I say something about this general equity thing? This. I get the sense sometimes that evangelicals, I'm talking about basically any conservative Christian, whether they're Presbyterian, Baptist, or whatever, by evangelical, that's how I'm using it. I get the sense sometimes that their objection is almost tantamount to saying, I think that some of the penalties for certain of these sins and crimes was too harsh.
Yes.
And I find that to be absolutely repulsive.
Yep.
Right? Like, so like they think
they're more merciful than God.
Killing homosexual acts, people that participate in that. I mean, that is, and you say to yourself, well, you do understand that God, the holy God, actually did do that. Now,
Amen.
I am not saying that would be wise or prudent in our culture. However, to claim in the way that it's sometimes said that it is like the objection almost seems to be that is draconian and horrible. Well, my first thought is, okay, if God were to come down and tell America to do that today, would you have objection to that? And I think some people feel that way.
Yep.
And I think we should look at all of those penalties for all of those crimes and sins, and we should start by saying that in principle they are okay.
They're just.
They are
righteous.
just.
They're
and
wholly
right
just.
and
True.
That's a modest way to put it.
say humane.
Yep.
Divine.
Right?
They're divine.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So all that to say is that I really think ministers and just Christians in general should be very careful, because it does lead to this Marcionism, this idea that somehow the God in the Old Testament was doing something different, and he was kind of really harsh, but under the gospel, like that harshness, God does not have that sort of righteousness or justice in him, or something like that. And that it would be horrible if a government would do anything like God's government did in the Old Testament, in principle.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So you're not.
To clarify, so the point Lynch is making is that there's a vast difference between talking about something that is just and right in principle and something that is appropriate prudentially in a particular scenario. So Lynch's point is that you are called by the beckoning of the Holy Spirit, speaking through the words of the prophets in the Old Testament, to praise the Lord our God for his laws about the death penalty, which included adultery, it included homosexuality, it included
disobedience to children or to parents.
Yep.
Yeah.
We should, the Holy Spirit is working in our lives to turn us into the kind of people that say, hallelujah, hallelujah, right, about the justice and glory of God. That does not mean that I think it's a good idea to just start whip snap doing that right now, copy and paste. That's not appropriate. We need to be wise and prudential for what's going to achieve the public good in our current scenario, right? But we still praise God to see his justice and wisdom in the Old Testament.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, James, as we bring it in, where can people find your book if they want to get a copy of it?
They can find it on founders.org. You can find it on founders.org. If you get to it before October 1st, there's a nice little pre-sale discount. And I hope you buy them. I hope it makes you think. I hope you like it. And it should be really good for like Bible studies and small groups and sessions. I hope this will be one helpful way to use it. Everyone's talking about Christian nationalism. In a way, this book doesn't talk about Christian nationalism. It's only talking about the duties of the civil magistrates, right?
As has been historically understood by American Presbyterians. And well,
if your session though wants to look at a nice summary of historic American Presbyterian views of the duties of the civil magistrate, I hope this would be a good resource for them.
And I found it helpful and edifying. James Baird, Michael Lynch, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for joining the conversation on the Westminster Standard Podcast, which is sponsored by Jude 3 and the PCA. For more information or to make a donation to support the work of Jude 3, please visit our website, jude3pca.org. We will be on break next Monday, but the following Monday we will have a special report from the Bible Presbyterian Church as they have made an application to join with NAPARC. I'll talk to you then. Thank you.